Hi, I'm attorney Gregory Dell, and I'm here with attorney Cesar Gavidia, and we're going to talk about one of Cesar's success stories and a claim that he was able to resolve on behalf of one of our clients against Unum Disability Insurance Company. And Cesar, in these videos, we like to talk about the background of the case, why the claim was denied, what you did to overcome the denial, and then provide tips that could help someone who has a Unum long-term disability claim. So in this case, tell us a little bit about the claimant and the background of the claim.
Well, our client was a senior projects manager for a company called Metals, and he'd been with the company many years, and he started having some problems, some pretty pronounced problems with his short-term memory and his attention, enough that he sought, some medical attention for it. And they did some testing on him, neuropsychological testing, which we're really familiar with. It's testing that's done primarily to see what kind of cognitive issues someone may have, either related to something neurological, something involving the brain, or even something psychiatric. And in his case, the neurological testing came back that he did have cognitive decline, cognitive impairments, but it could not specify exactly why. At least this was the diagnostic neuropsychological testing he'd had done. He'd been seeing his doctors. He'd been given a diagnosis of anxiety and depression, and also early onset dementia. His primary doctor was pretty convinced that that's what he was seeing there in terms of all the signs. He even got referred to a neurologist who was on board with that particular diagnosis. And that's what led to him having to take time off of work, because that neurologist that he went to see told him, listen, you're definitely having these problems. I recommend that you take some time off of work. And that's what he did. He sought short-term disability with his Unum group disability insurance, and it was denied. Unum denied the short-term. He went through his own appeals, and they shot down each one of those appeals. And applied for long-term disability, which is something a lot of people don't realize they can do, even though they've been shot down or denied short-term disability. These plans are often two separate plans, and they can't prevent you just because in most cases you've been denied short-term disability from applying for long-term disability. But of course he applied for long-term disability and they denied that, and that's when he sought us out.
And so what was the basis for their denial of the long-term disability?
Well, basically what they'd done is they'd done a medical review internally with a physician that they'd selected, and that physician said basically that from all of the records they reviewed, that they couldn't see that there was anything organically wrong with this with our client. In other words, that based on MRIs, based on objective tests that they see, that there's nothing there showing that there's a organic brain problem or physical issue relating to this cognitive problem. They basically said that there's no real objective way to establish that he's having these limitations, except that there's neuropsychological testing there, which they disputed because they said there wasn't any validity testing done with it. So they said it was unreliable, and basically just found any way possible to really cast doubt at his claim.
Your client didn't have a traumatic accident, didn't have a brain injury or anything like that. A negative MRI of the brain didn't show any tumors or anything like that. So what other type of objective evidence could Unum possibly expect someone who's having cognitive decline to present?
And that's the frustrating part about all of this is sometimes there isn't. But in this particular case, you have to look at the terms of this policy. In terms of this particular policy, and some do require objective proof or objective tests to show some sort of problem. I would probably argue that the neuropsychological testing is exactly that, but this doctor was trying to, like I said, say it's unreliable and cast doubt on the validity of that testing that was done. But these policies don't necessarily insure or only pay if you have objective testing prove that you have this problem. They're not insuring you or paying you because you have a diagnosis. They're insuring you and paying you because you have a sickness that's causing these symptoms, that's creating these limitations that prevent you from performing the duties of your occupation. So that's really the strategy of attacking it.
So it wasn't that Unum was saying, we don't think you have these limitations. They were playing a game and saying, we don't see enough medical evidence to support your claim. However, them saying there isn't enough medical evidence there really is no objective evidence that they were looking for, especially if they're saying the objective test, the neuropsych exam wasn't objective. So what did you do on appeal in order to win this claim?
So it was kind of a multifaceted approach with his appeal. I felt that we weren't going to convince them that the prior neuropsychological testing was valid because they kind of had already kind of pushed it into this corner where there wasn't validity testing done, so we're not going to count it. So we redid the neuropsychological testing this time with validity tests, and again, the same results. I thought it was also important to really get his doctors to explain more their opinions concerning this being an early onset dementia issue, especially because we're also dealing with these comorbidities of anxiety and depression. This is not unusual, particularly in these dementia cases or in traumatic brain injury cases. You do have these comorbid anxiety and depression psychological issues, and if you let Unum have their way, they're going to push this claim into a mental nervous claim where their liability is completely limited to 24 months. So I felt it was really important that we attack this claim and from the approach that this is a physical condition. This is a physical disease that's creating these limitations for them.
You mentioned the mental nervous limitation common in a Unum disability policy. Can you explain what that is?
So the mental nervous limitation basically is a provision within this group disability policy, and it's very common. It's not necessarily unique to Unum. You see it in many disability insurance group policies where the benefits are limited or capped at 24 months of benefit payments, usually for the lifetime of the claim or lifetime of the policy, if the condition or disability is related to a mental nervous condition. Now and policies define mental nervous conditions differently. Some policies are very specific. They say if it's anything that appears in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the most current Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which basically is a manual or a book that diagnoses and contains these mental, nervous, and physical, psychiatric conditions, then it's going to be considered a mental nervous condition for purposes of the policy, and they're going to limit the claim to 24 months. But early onset dementia is not one of those things.
And did you go back to the same treating doctors for the appeal?
We did. They were actually very supportive, which we're fortunate to have, because there's a very high degree of claims where you find that you don't have a lot of support, or you don't have cooperative doctors, or doctors who are very busy and they're not going to really give special attention or really much attention to what they need to do on their part to ensure that what's accurately represented and their opinions are coming across as the real opinions of these doctors, not something their nurse or medical assistant had just jotted down from reviewing some records. These are the actual opinions of the doctors.
So what do you think? You've won the appeal now. Unum took the evidence that you presented and they accepted it as disabling. Do you know, though, are you going to get past that 24-month limitation? Because this claimant was never paid at all, correct?
Right.
So what issues do you anticipate?
So not only, we're past the 24-month limitation.
Okay, now you are.
So we're not really all that concerned about it. They've already accepted that this is a early onset dementia related disability claim. I don't think if we hadn't approached the appeal in the appropriate way that would have been possible. I think his benefits would have likely been limited or capped at that 24-month mark. Right. We also were dealing with the change in occupational definition from own occupation to any occupation, and we overcame that hurdle. So these are things that a lot of people, when they're denied disability benefits by Unum and they're considering appealing on their own, they're not appreciating what kind of damage they could be doing by approaching the appeal the wrong way or not addressing certain things that need to be addressed in that appeal, because you're going to be basically held to whatever you submit to them at that point in time. And if you're not addressing that this is not a mental nervous issue, this is a physical issue or organic issue, or if you're not addressing the issues relating to that transition from own occupation to any occupation, then it's only a matter of time before your benefits are going to be terminated. It's going to be much more difficult to get it overturned at that point.
Yeah, it's a great point that you make, because what you were doing was you were saying, look, I'm going to anticipate the future. I know they haven't paid you at all, but they're probably going to argue mental nervous limitation. So I want to get you paid more than 24 months. And then they're probably going to argue, well, your definition changed, and so if you couldn't do that job, here's another job that you could do. So you were taking their two future arguments so that you would basically win the battle and the war at the same time, knowing that you don't just want to win this now and then have your client cut off again within a couple months. And so what's going on now to continue to protect the benefits moving forward?
Well, it's important that you have to maintain that standard in terms of support from the doctors. It's always a moment of apprehension when the doctor retires or they move from the practice and now the doctors are getting changed up and the new doctor that's coming in or client perhaps has to go to a new practice. They're not really familiar with kind of the groundwork that we've laid here with Unum and establishing this disability claim. So it's really important that we stay on top of the medical treatment, the records and what the records are stating, ensuring that if there is some sort of change in terms of his medical care, that we're on top of it before Unum takes advantage of that moment where they may be able to get a new physician to say something that will compromise the disability claim.
Right. Well, this was a great victory, and it was especially strong because you were able to get out of that 24-month mental nervous limitation that we know Unum and all the companies always try to pigeonhole a client into that so they can limit their exposure. So fantastic job, and I'm sure the client certainly appreciates the ability to have his benefits continuing now for as long as he needs them. So if you're somebody who has a Unum long-term disability insurance claim, feel free to reach out to Cesar, myself. No matter where you live in the country, we're available to assist you, and we always provide an initial free phone consultation. We look forward to speaking with you in the future. Hi, I'm Gregory Dell, the managing attorney of Dell Disability Lawyers, and I hope you find the video you just watched helpful. We put these videos out all of the time, and we'd love if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Beyond our videos on our YouTube channel, we also have lots of information available on our website at diattorney.com, and we encourage you to come to our website. The goal is that we want you to be educated about the disability insurance process, and when you get to our website, you'll see that we have information all about your specific disability insurance company, your occupation, and your medical condition. And we've designed our website such that you can easily search our website to find things that you may specifically be looking for. Now, at our website, we have thousands and thousands of pages of information, hundreds of videos that you can search, plus we're building a section of reviews of all the disability insurance companies, and we have the Ask Our Lawyer section where you can go ahead and ask us any questions that you may have. Now, we realize that you may not need us right now, but you may need us in the future to help you with your disability claim, and we think one of the best ways to keep in touch is by clicking the button below and subscribing to our channel. And most importantly, again, no matter where you live in the country, we're always available. Just go ahead and give us a call. We're happy to discuss your claim and let you know immediately if we can help you.